All right, so we are here
Yep.
with Chris Mills, the surf strength coach. He's been putting out surf training and injury prevention content for about the last 11 years, according to YouTube, and has a beautiful app that provides you with any program you need to improve your surf performance and preventing injuries. He also runs surf trips across different destinations around the globe, honing surfers' skills on the best possible waves around. And today we're going to dive a bit deeper into the world of surf training, performance, and injury prevention.
It's a good
All
intro.
right, man. Well,
It's a good
well,
intro.
I said 11 years. How accurate is that?
Probably pretty close. I mean, I think I probably did my first YouTube somewhere between like 27 and 29. I'm not sure which. So it's about 11-ish years. Yeah. Yeah, I think that was the very
Yeah.
first YouTube
Okay.
foray.
Right. So, kind of where I wanted to get started with you today is kind of you telling me about your journey through the surfing world and the training fitness world and how you came to blend the
Mm.
two. And maybe you can start off with like which one came first for you.
Sure. Um, it's been a long process that has again taken me to places that were very different from my initially expected career path. Um, so I grew up like playing a lot of athletics, boxing, soccer. I even played baseball at one point, running cross
Hmm.
country, but also doing a lot of skating and occasionally surfing. Um,
Right.
and then surfing became more predominant in my life through high school and then a lot more in college, and kind of trips overseas. But I'd always been involved in fitness and athletics and training. And like through college, I was just trying to be as like jacked as possible while
Right.
still like, doing athletics. And so there was always
Right.
that. And so then I was going to school for my initial path. I was going to go to law school. So like my
Okay.
actual degree is in the criminal justice realm, kind of like the pre-law route.
Cool.
So it was after college, um, that in between surf trips and me just bartending, I was like, I need to do something. I like athletics. Let me get a personal training cert. And I think my
Sure.
first one was NASM. And that just like then steamrolled into I don't know enough. I need to do more. I need to do more courses. I need to do more curriculum. Um, and here we are. Like, I think I got my first NASM cert when I was like 25. And so
Right.
15 years later, here we are. And so it was getting more into athletic development and
Hmm.
training and rehab and massage school and certifications. Whereas, like, I'm also really interested in surfing. I'm not really interested in general population fitness. And so, like,
Right.
how can I start attempting to combine these? And at the
Hmm.
time, YouTube was still kind of fledgling, blogs were a thing. And so I was like, I'll just start talking about the integration of these things. And it was just through persistence of that for a long time of being scorned and ridiculed by a lot of people in the surf world, being like a fucking jock or like the kook guy
Right.
talking about
Right.
training and fitness, where now it's a thing. Now it's a thing. Like
Right.
12, 15 years ago, like it wasn't a thing. um, and here we are, persistence and kind of just a dogged determination, and I think some luck of being one of the first people to really start talking about it a lot. Here we
Right.
are.
I was gonna say, yeah, like there aren't that many people talking about like surf training, injury performance. Definitely more than before, but even when I'm like, all
Mm.
right, who's out there in the space putting out information, like good information? Um, you're definitely
Yeah,
like one of the few who's super prolific too, especially with that
thank you.
sweet app you came out with. Um, yeah, it was awesome how you positioned yourself uh, that many years ago in a place to like now with all the new tech and how big social media is to
Yeah.
be like the guy for surf strength and uh, like
I
performance and injury prevention.
appreciate that, man. again, a lot of it was kind of luck and fortuitous of me just kind
Hmm.
of being one of the first people. But like, I came up like Paul Hineker, who, if you don't know him, check him out. Like, he's one of the godfathers of surf fitness. Like, I first saw him do the Taylor Knox. He worked along with Taylor Knox doing some of those first
Okay.
like surf fitness. I forget the name of them, but like he had some surf fitness DVDs, and then like I saw Paul Hineker doing this stuff, and I'm like, there's there's potential here to do something like this. And
Right.
then I fell into the stream of Paul Check because a lot of Czech practitioners were working with high level surfers at the time, like Mick Fanning Rehab with some Czech
Okay.
practitioners, and Paul
Cool.
Check was like working with Laird. So like
Right.
I steamrolled into that whole Czech curriculum and path, and then again the kind of luck of being one of the first people kind of really talking about it in that space in this ongoing prolific kind of manner, whereas now I see it as pretty potentially saturated. Like there's a lot of people doing it, which is fine. Like
Mm.
there's awareness of it
Right.
now. But like everything on social media and in fitness, like it hits this saturation point before it morphs into
Right.
something else. So it's just kind of the natural process of it all.
Right. Have you worked with like physical therapists or other kind of coincided with different people in the industry? I don't know if you've brought any on your trips or yeah, just kind of
Yeah.
side alongside with them in the surfing world.
In the surfing world specifically, I haven't as much. We've tried to find ways to bring like osteopaths on the boat trips, but the boats just,
Cool.
we're going to try to bring some onto land camps. The boat trips, the margins of costs and guest space is too tight essentially. But I mean,
Hmm.
personally, like I've worked in chiropractic clinics doing tissue work. In Sydney, I worked in a physical therapy clinic for a couple years. I still do mentoring with some physical therapists.
Cool.
Eventually, if I ever open a facility, the facility will have good physical therapists or osteopaths within it.
Right.
So I think, the hardest thing I think about being a trainer now, not the hardest thing, a difficult thing with the saturation of information on social media
Hmm.
is really getting clear on what your lane of work is. Like a lot of personal
Right.
trainers are trying to be physical therapists, and like, you know what I mean? Like I think it's just a
Totally.
little more difficult thing to wade and wander through nowadays of getting clear like what your lane of work is and what your skill set is, and then just really trying
Totally.
to collaborate and integrate with other professions.
Yeah, I mean, I could relate to that. I've been a personal trainer since I was like 21, and I'm 28 now. And I've always kind of veered more towards like the injury prevention lane because I was more intrigued by that. But now I'm in physical therapy school now, and I see like, man, like some of the things that I thought I had an idea about, I was like, oh man, I had no idea about some of these things. Um, so it's really interesting how that how that process works.
Well,
Um,
and it has to happen too, because if we're in the field and you're self driven and you aspire to be better, that in conjunction with you're working with people that are hurt. So you have to self educate and learn either how to work with those things. But it's kind of like a lot of physical therapists started in kind of the fitness realm. And it's this, I
mhm.
personally wish I had gone fully into, in the States, a physio doctorate or the physical therapy route in Australia, just for that more clinical understanding. Because, man, if you can come from a
Mhm.
training perspective and strength and conditioning perspective, and then take that into the rehabilitative perspective, I think like the magic is
Right.
where those actually meet. You know,
Right.
that's
Yeah, I would
an
say
incredible skill set.
saying that the main thing I feel like is the differentiator in PT school. Obviously, you learn the treatment skills like mobilizations and think about injuries and just a broader knowledge base with other PT things that encompasses like
Mm,
stroke stroke patients, pediatrics, stuff like that. But I feel like the main thing that
yeah.
differentiates physical therapy and personal trainer is that diagnostic ability of finding the specific tissues that are impaired, and then treating those specific tissues that are impaired. Whereas personal
Yeah.
training, it's more like broad, global type concepts that you apply. You apply to patients, and you have some idea of what may be contributing to certain things, but it's just a little bit less specific.
That's it, man. It's the specificity. And when you're dealing with the human body, the more specific you can be, especially with pain intervention, the better things are. So, like, I am so clear with clients that, like, I am not diagnosing you. I am not a physio. I'm just a strength and conditioning coach that happens to be pretty well educated. Um, and so I'll often, this is what I think your pain issue is. Now go see your physio. Let them know this is what I thought and confirm or deny. Let me know what it is. And because again,
Right.
it's that specificity, man. Like as with it, with injury and trauma and ongoing like loading issues, if you can nail down what that pain generator is, it's way easier to then intervene.
Right. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, the Aussie physio system is very different than the US physio system.
It's a lot easier entry point to see physios
Mhm.
via the insurance system in Australia than it is the US. Like I wanted to go
Yeah.
see a physio here in the US for my neck recently. I've lived overseas for like a decade. So I forgot the US like healthcare system. And it's
Yeah,
like,
it's
oh,
not
you've got to
great.
go see your GP first and tell your GP about your neck. I'm like, look, GP, just give me a script to go see if I'm paying you to waste my time. Let's go see a physio. Whereas in Australia, it can be direct, make the phone call, they'll
Totally.
like swipe your insurance card right there and you're good to go.
Totally. Yeah, it's interesting the variation in PTs you get in the States as well. It's very hit or miss with some physical therapists in the States, and I find that like uh usually like the good PTs are the ones that don't take insurance in the States, I
Dude,
find.
whole wholeheartedly, man. This is actually a conundrum I've dealt with a lot personally because egotistically and just for career path, I still contemplate going back and getting a full physio doctorate or degree in the
Sure,
US or
right.
Australia. My
Sure.
primary interest to not do it in the US is the costs. Where like I
Dude.
have citizenship for Australia, so it's my ability.
Oh,
I
nice.
started to go back to school for a physio doctorate in the US. And then when
Hmm.
I was looking into all the loans and time durations, I was like, I can't do this. It doesn't make sense right now. Because like I already had friends that were physios that were making less money as a physio than they were as a
Right.
personal trainer at like Equinox, you know?
Yeah.
And so I'm like, the finances of it. And so then you get thrust into, you've got school loans and it's an amazing career path, but when you've got to make school loans, like your first foray is high turnover physiotherapy clinics just so you can get paid and it's your first entry job. And then
Yeah.
you're like,
Yeah.
okay, am I in the path of just doing high turnover physio clinical work? Do I own a physio clinic that just does high turnover work? Or do I go the cash based model and start doing the type of physical therapy work that I went to school for and I personally value and think is of value? It's I think you're totally right, man. The cash base is for good work is the way to go.
Yeah. That was a really good breakdown of the thought process behind going or not going to physical therapy school. I think a lot of like me, myself included, and a lot of my classmates teetered on that thought process.
Yeah.
And I worked as a personal trainer in San Francisco. Really epic gym there, Diacati. They basically rent out space to trainers there. Um,
Cool.
and yeah, I was making like six figures as a personal trainer there, probably more than my entry level salary when I graduate out of physical therapy school, no doubt.
Yeah.
Um, so, and like you said, like the type of care that you would want to provide to patients would be in that cash based model because the mill of a lot of PT companies doesn't really cut it.
No, and I get it. I get it from the business perspective. And I also
Yeah.
see it because I've been involved in both types of clinics. I've interned in both types of clinics. I'm friends with physical therapists that have been in both types of clinics, and it's a it's a tough model to deliver the standard quality of care that one hopes to give to people. That's why you got into the
Totally.
field in the first place. Um, and yeah, and especially in the US, the way health insurance, it's it's so reprehensible. How the insurance companies have basically overtaken the healthcare systems in the US and control basically all access to it. And if you're stuck in the
Right.
healthcare system, it's going to limit the availability of high quality care. Just it's really unfortunate.
Yeah, yeah, totally, 100%. I will say, I just did my first rotation in Tennessee for 6 weeks over the summertime, um, and that was quite an experience just being in Tennessee. But working in a type of clinic like that, I will say that, you know, the one thing is it does provide people who are like lower income with the ability to see a
Yeah,
PT, which is like the main, I would say like the main benefit to a model like that is like, okay, the quality of care isn't quite as high, but at least, anyone can go get this type of care.
sure, man. Absolutely. And like I wholeheartedly agree with you. Um, it is a saving grace for a lot of people financially because like the good physios I know, like they're 250, $300 an hour. I saw a
Totally, yeah.
chiro in California recently that was $600 for an initial session. You
It's
know,
insane.
most people cannot afford that whatsoever.
Right.
Um, and so it opens up an intervention route for people that are financially constrained otherwise. And it's like any field of work, there's good and bad. I the the insurance mandated clinic I went and saw because I just wanted some physio hands on my neck to confirm what I thought was an insurance mandated clinic, and they were legit. They were absolutely
Right.
legit. And
Right.
I've been to some other
Totally.
ones that are just like, I've been to other ones that are like, okay, let's put on your e-stim and now your hot pack,
Right.
you're done for the day, you know?
Right. Just outdated.
Yeah.
So I guess kind of switching gears a little bit from the fun insurance conversations.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, I guess like what was one of the worst injuries that you've had and had to recover from?
My neck and right shoulder. My
Neck.
right shoulder's given me shit off and on for years, and I believe it largely
Okay.
stems from I had some really bad whiplashes, so I've got some like C5-6, some C4-5 kind of nerve
Yeah.
funk and bullshit and TOS
Okay.
symptoms and
Yeah.
nerve stuff. That one is probably the thing that is the most annoying in conjunction with me now
Hmm.
doing a lot of work at a computer. Like the computer
Right.
work and cervical disc stuff I've got going on is like they're just
No bueno.
terrible for each other. No bueno, man. So I'd say the neck has probably been not the most difficult, but the most ongoing kind of annoyance. Like I've really got to stay on top of it. I've really got to stay kind of diligent with looking after it. If I don't, it will start coming back and giving me issues. Um,
Right.
and I've had some low back stuff that I really have to stay on top of. But I'd say probably the neck stuff, man, is the funkiest of them.
Right. And so what is that? What does like your neck routine look like? Like what do you do to kind of keep
Yeah.
that?
Um, So a lot of kind of quote unquote mobility. So various cervical spine kind of movement work that's in the Z health realm or even the FRC realm where you're doing kind of like upper
Okay.
cervical self mobilization type of stuff.
Right.
I'll do kind of a lot of first rib mobilizations like strap assisted or even kind of ball assisted first rib stuff. Uh,
Right.
I still do quite a lot of cervical spine isometrics. I find
Okay.
that isometrics have been quite helpful. Rotational, frontal plane,
Right.
sagittal, like kind of all of them. Eldoa. If I do a lot of Eldoa, it's really helpful for my neck, my entire spine. But there's specific Eldoas for each vertebral segment, and so like I'll hit
Oh, what is
specifically T2.
a Aldoa?
The exact
What is
acronym,
yeah.
I'm going to butcher it. It's from a French osteopath named Guy Voyer, Guyvoyer,
Hmm.
and the ELDOA, the longitudinal decoaptation. I'm going to butcher the acronym, but it's basically positions that place the fascial system in a certain tensioned position that impart a decoaptation, so pulling apart load into a specific
Okay.
vertebral segment. So there's like
Hmm.
a T23 LDOA, a T12. So if
Gotcha.
I stay really diligent with my upper cervical, or not upper cervical, but cervical LDOAs and upper thoracic, that helps tremendously, especially if I'm on a surf trip. And really just being aware of posture in front of a computer. Those I'd say
Right.
are probably collectively the things that seem to keep my neck the most surf capable.
Right. Cool. Yeah, you got a solid routine there. Um, in
Try
terms
to,
of
man.
like, yeah, you have. I mean, you have to, right? In terms of like the people that you've worked with over the years, and I guess more in like a surf specific setting, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. Who was the most impactful person you've worked with where you took their surfing to the next level, or you helped them heal from some sort of injury that was holding them back? Any like person comes
Yeah.
to mind?
There's been quite a few with back patients over the years, like coming up through the Trek curriculum initially, like there you learn a lot of kind of spinal pathology stuff, especially like lumbar spine pathology stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
so, if you're working with surfers, let's just take general population, like over the age of 30 or 40, most of those people are going to have some type of spinal pathology, whether it be low back or
Right.
cervical. Like,
Right.
so then you take people that, have led an active life, and then they've also probably had a lot of computer time or sedentary postures, and they're still surfing. They're going to have low back stuff. So there's
Right.
been a couple low back people where like they were giving up on surfing, like chronic pain scenarios, um, and helped them get back over the hump with those things that were pretty impactful. I think the difficult aspect of that is getting people to realize that fully regaining their capacity to surf after coming off some type of severe spinal pathology, especially one that involves kind of like nerve
Mm-hmm.
issues, that it's going to be a
Right.
process, and it's going to be like a six,
Right.
9, 12 month process to like full sport function again. And so, to be fair, like a lot of people drop off through that process, or they see you very
Right.
intermittently. Um, and so, I've had a couple people that have just like die hard with me to the end scenarios, and like to see what they've accomplished is amazing. But then it's also like I'll have people where I do one or two consults with them, and then I don't hear from them for 2 years. And when they
Mm-hmm.
do, it's an email like praising everything we did together in just those 2 hours and how it completely changed their trajectory. And so I think that's also something that's difficult in our field, is that we often we don't necessarily get direct feedback from people that we actually really have impacted, or we don't know what type of
Right.
impact we actually had on them. Um, that because it's not everybody like will give you praise in terms, or you have enough time to see what they start to accomplish, whereas a lot of people are
Right.
probably being positively impacted and just not necessarily letting you know directly.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. We don't have that immediate effect in our field. It definitely usually takes time. It's a hard sell sometimes. I'd assume low back is probably one of the main things that you probably have to deal with, especially as you get older, right? Patients get more like
Yeah.
stenotic, more nerve type issues.
Yeah.
Has that been like the main, probably the most common limitation you've seen across the years?
Yeah, low back pain is general. I've had quite a few neck people, shoulders again, like I'd say low back and shoulders are probably two most prevalent. um, Now that the apps come out, and we've done a lot of marketing around this pop-up program for the app. So when I started first introducing a pop-up program, I didn't realize it was really going to become such a thing that
Mm.
I've kind of become known for. Like in terms of our marketing and what's on YouTube, there's a lot of pop-up stuff. And what I've started to see so much of is older guys with really jacked up hips or really
Mhm.
irresponsibly rehabbed knee reconstructions, and their
Right.
pop-up's gone, bro. Gone.
Oh,
Gone.
wow.
And like for some of them, and so you can think about, think about being 50 or older, having anywhere from 20 to 40 pounds of excess weight, having
Right.
some jacked up hips that can no longer internally rotate. There's no hip flexion capacity, and ankles that are like lacking dorsiflexion, and try to shove that into a pop up process.
Right.
And so,
Right.
like, as of now, man, I see a lot of guys with just have completely lost that ability to get to their feet. And it's
Mhm.
from hips, knees, and just joints that can't move the way they need to anymore.
Right. Yeah, I mean that totally makes sense. Um, that's funny that you said the pop up program has been like one of your. I mean, I guess it makes sense. It's like the crux of surfing, right? If you can't do that, you can't really surf on your feet, at least. Um,
Yeah. I never
but
realized initially, it was until we started working with a lot of I started working with lots of surfers and running coaching camps that it like started to really become aware of like what the problem was. And the issue is that you get technique coaches that are like, here's the technique, but they don't understand orthopedics and bone structure and range of motion and like
hmm
mechanical specifics of the human body. And so
hmm
you have this huge subset of people that are like watching a technique video on how to pop up more efficiently from a technique coach that doesn't understand hip joint mechanics or knee flexion
right,
range of motion or any of that stuff. And so there's all these people who literally structurally cannot move the way the technique requires, and so suddenly, like, I've got this program that's teaching you basic hip mobilizations and an assessment process for what joint, and because all these like orthopedic specifics that allow the technique to actually happen. And there's a lot of guys out there that are like 40 and above whose bodies are just kind of broken, more or less. And if you can't get to your feet, you can't surf. And
right,
so they can't get to their feet, And so boom, there we are, like a pop-up program that has an orthopedic awareness as well as some technique awareness.
right. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's an essential component, as you said, in the technique of it, because you could know the technique all day, but if you can't make it there via your body mechanics, then you're not going to get anywhere. Um, do
Exactly.
you have
That's
do you
exactly right.
have a lot of those guys coming onto your surf trip where they're just like stoked to be there and then they're like, just like really struggle because of that issue?
We have we've gotten to the point where we're explicitly clear about our surf trip offerings and what's required of a surfer to get the most out of a trip. So for example, Indonesia, if we're in the Mentawais, we're surfing high
Hmm.
quality reef break, that's not the place to try to fix your pop up. Like
Right.
we need people that can pop up. It doesn't need to be perfect necessarily, but there needs to be some consistency there. Whereas if somebody is not able to get to their feet at all, like the Mentawais isn't the place to work on that. And so I've run
Right.
some like more beginner oriented trips in the past where we're working a lot more on those fundamentals. Um, I had a guy come on a trip earlier this year, and he came, amazing guy. You was an exceptionally capable surfer back in like 70s, 80s, like I surfed Indonesia back in like the early 80s and stuff, Hawaii back in the
Right.
day. And he
Cool.
came and he's like, I want to be able to regain my surfing. He sent me some videos of his pop up. I'm like, look, I don't know. I need to see you orthopedically. Come on the trip. Maybe we'll make it happen. And he got there, and he never properly rehabbed bilateral knee reconstructions. And
Wow.
so, like, like coming off of knee reconstruction, like priority numero uno for somebody that's athletically inclined, especially a surfer, would be like restoring full range of motion, especially
Right.
like full knee flexion.
Totally.
And
Yeah.
so he never had. And so
Wow.
it was a really unfortunate scenario where I'm like, I can't help you. You structurally are unable to move right the way that sport requires. I don't know anything about what appliances are in your, I don't know what your knee reconstruction is. So when you get back to California, you need to have a conversation with your surgeon about what and if, and then find a physio that is willing to like, I've never, I don't, that's not my like lane of work,
Right.
like I'm not.
Right. Right.
So it's like, look, man, I don't know. Maybe find somebody, some heavy tissue work to those scars. How hard can they crank on it? Maybe you can get it back. So that was kind of a sad scenario.
Yeah, that's rough. Yeah, it's tough when that's pretty much all I was doing. I mean, half of what I was doing in Tennessee was cranking on people's knees post knee reconstruction. So
Yeah.
I'm intimately familiar with that. But some of those
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
who didn't restore that range, they would send them back in for surgery to cut through the scar tissue and through the contractures just so they can regain that mobility. Because
Yeah.
if you don't gain it back by, I forget the specific time frame, but you have to kind of go in. They have to cut through that tissue, that scar down.
One of my clients is a orthopedic surgeon, works with a lot of Major League Baseball teams, and he does a lot of, he's kind of general orthopedics, but he says he does a lot of hips and knees. And so I'm asking him, like I'm digging into him, hips and knees. And he's like, look, dude, hips nowadays are amazing. Like you could jack up your rehab and you'll probably still have a fair bit of range of motion come back. But he's
Hmm.
like, knees, man, knees and surfers, like if you get a knee reconstruction or replacement, you got to go after that rehab with somebody that knows what they're doing
Right.
diligently.
Right. I guess kind of moving on from that area, like who was your biggest influence like in the surf training? I'm sure in the training world there were a lot, but like maybe in the surf
Sure.
world, who's been your biggest influence?
Yeah, 100%, man. First seeing Paul Hineker,
Paul
who
Henniker.
again, I saw, yeah. I think he's DNS training or something on Instagram, but he's worth finding, man. And he used
Okay.
to work with like a
Cool.
lot of pro snowboarders, still trains. He still works with Taylor Knox. Me seeing
Sweet.
him, like that was so much a catalyst of like, holy shit, I could do this. Like, here's somebody doing it. Maybe
Yeah.
I can too.
Right.
And so again, that was probably 15 years ago or so.
Right.
Um, he was probably the biggest. And then there wasn't much else in the sports, like in that kind of sports world that I was really seeing other than I saw Paul Check doing some work with some high level
Yeah.
guys or other Czech
He was
practitioners
big.
with some high level
Yeah.
guys. He was big. Um, and that was kind of honestly it in the surf world. And then because I couldn't necessarily, I didn't know of or I didn't have access to, because again, this was pre social media when I was first started
Right.
doing this, like it was internet and blogs, like people actually read blogs. And
Right.
so it was more so like, okay, here's some people doing it. Let me just keep going after accreditations and certifications in the fitness realm,
Hmm.
athletics and rehab and soft tissue work and
Right.
stuff, and just keep
Right.
relaying that information back to the surf world.
Right.
Um, Whereas now it's way easier to connect with people because like they're on social media, like you can see a lot more people doing it. But I still wholeheartedly 100% will give credit to Hineker and just seeing what he was
Cool.
doing to spur on a catalyst of what I could maybe do professionally.
Yeah, I that's the first time I've heard of him. I'm looking forward to doing a little bit of research on that. That's
Yeah,
funny you
yeah.
mentioned the thing about no one reads blogs anymore. We're all on TikTok these days. I don't know if you've transitioned yet.
Dude, all you youngsters, man, all you youngsters on TikTok. My business partner, he's like, dude, we need to make a TikTok account. And I was like, I'm not doing it. I was like, if you guys want, if you guys want to handle that, go handle it. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I mean it's crazy how big that platform has gotten nowadays. But I think it definitely has shrunk the attention span. I was on your site. I do enjoy your blog posts, specifically on like breath work.
Thanks.
And I think you were writing about you have people come on the trip who are like super stoked to get out there to get on some epic waves, but they get out there and they get freaked out and they don't even
Yeah.
want to get in the water. What's
Yeah.
that process like, coaching them through that?
So interesting in that it depends what skill set you're working with of surfers, right? But everybody has a wave size or wave scenario where the limiting factor is going to be their headspace. Mentally, do they want
Like,
it? Mentally, do they feel safe? Are they willing to push through things? Fear,
right.
kind of the fear stuff. And so it wasn't until we started really running a lot of trips and getting clear on how to run and organize trips and how to be more clear on who's a good fit for the trips. But you get a lot of surfers that are competent enough and capable, but they've never seen a legit high performance wave. So, like some of the
Mm-hmm.
high end waves in Indonesia, hollow trees, rifles, greenbush, like these are A
Sure.
plus waves. And if
Right.
somebody's never seen a wave like that, suddenly they do. And it's just about their size that's comfort combined with a crowd of really good surfers, and
Right.
there's reef, and they've heard stories about people hitting that shallow end section. It becomes this, there's a lot of mental turmoil and anxiety and stress and fear.
Totally.
And
Totally.
so everybody on a surf coaching trip is at one point going to have to deal with some fear or anxiety inducing mental headspace, whether
Right.
it's just because of wave size or maybe crowds or something is going to tickle this headspace where they start getting stressed out and worked up. And so you try to help people process it and work through it. And so a lot of surf coaching becomes mental and emotional coaching. And any surf coach, I
Right.
think, would agree, unless you're working with such a skilled surfer that they can handle most wave scenarios that are thrown at them and still be in a mental space to be able to work on nuanced details of surf coaching. Where a lot of times it's you help people unravel it. Okay, what are we stressed about? Is it a rational stress or an irrational fear? Like
Right.
how do we need to start unraveling this and opening it up? What can we do as coaches to help? And so really we're really impress upon people the need on our surf coaching camps to be as open and honest as possible with us as coaches and the others in the group so we can actually figure out how to help. Because sometimes you just get people that are
Right.
too timid and they close up and they shut down. We can't help work with you if you're not relaying information to us. And so it's just the reality.
Right.
If you're a surfer, you're going to get into situations that scare the shit out of you, and you're going to get into situations that you're having to push through barriers of fear, and you're going to get in situations that arise anxiety and mental stress. And do you have the coping strategies or the abilities to kind of harness that and work through it and turn it into kind of this energizing force? Or are you just going to get stressed out and go sit on the boat? And with all that said, sometimes wave situations, myself included, they're just too fucking big and scary. So I'm going to go sit on
Right.
the boat for a day and watch like these guys get shacked out of their mind.
Right. Totally. Yeah. So what is your like, if you had to assess me for like ability level or skill level, what's your process in placing me in like a category for like, okay, this is what he's comfortable with, or like the beginner, intermediate, advanced scale is always like kind of vague to me because I'm like, oh yeah, like
So vague,
maybe,
bro.
and it has so much
So
of like
vague.
my own ego involved with it, you know?
So much. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So much. Um, so this is actually an interesting conversation because it's one I have with the other coaches that we run camps with. And it's like we need to make a definitive model of beginner, intermediate, advanced. And there's kind of some out there, but
Right.
as individuals, I have found most surfers, 85% of surfers, greatly overinflate their actual skill level.
Yeah, I can see that.
And combine that with most surfers, it's changed nowadays a bit, but even still, most surfers don't have video footage of their surfing.
Hmm.
And so with like when we're trying to let's say you came to me and you're like, hey, I want to join one of your trips. I'm like, do you have video footage? Where do you live? What surfboards are you surfing? What sizes? What trips have you taken? Where have you surfed? And if you were to walk to the beach today and it's perfect in your opinion, what is that? What's it look
Right.
like? And so from that,
Okay.
you're just trying to get this like amalgamation of like, where does he fit into this realm? So I myself can have flares of some pretty competent surfing. I can get barreled, I can surf double overhead at times, and even I wouldn't consider myself an advanced surfer. Like
Hmm.
I'm high end intermediate with occasional flares of advanced surfing. I look at advanced surfing as like high level consistency. You could like, if you're winning comps, not pro level comps, but like local beach break comps and stuff, I
Okay.
look at that as advanced surfing, which leaves this intermediate spectrum as this
Right.
giant swath from like
Yeah. Huge.
one end is like huge. They're transitioning to like a 7.6 versus on the other end, I'm riding a 5.10 and getting barreled at macaronis, like it makes no
Right.
sense. Like that's such a crazy huge spectrum.
Yeah.
And
Totally.
so, totally, totally. And so I think even in intermediate, there's basically three groups: high intermediate, middle intermediate, low intermediate. That middle intermediate does really well on a lot of our surf coaching camps. They've started to
Gotcha.
transition to short boards. They don't have to be surfing like super high performance little potato chips, but like they're on some short boards and anywhere from like the 5.10 to 6.6, maybe a 6.8. They can duck dive. They can go left. They can go right. They can kind of trim down the line. They've surfed waves up to maybe head high.
Hmm.
That is kind of in this medium middle realm that we do really well coaching, especially in Indonesia.
Right.
Lower than that, you're still on a lot of foam. You're still falling at takeoffs. You're not reading waves very well. You're on boards that are too big to duck dive. You're not really a beginner. You're kind of in the intermediate realm, but you still have a lot of beginner tendencies. That's that low intermediate realm that we coach. It's just for our
Hmm.
Indonesia trips. It's not the right configuration or the right group of
And
skills.
what's like in your book a lot of foam like because like when I go into all the volume calculators out there on the internet for my height and weight, I'm like 5'6" and weigh like 155 pounds, and like the
Yeah,
volume for me is like 25 liters, something like that. And I'm like,
tiny,
oh my god,
tiny,
that's
bro.
tiny. Like that's tiny, especially in California where we have like
Yeah,
thick beach breaks with a lot of current. I normally surf. I have like a Channel Islands fish beard, 29 and a half liters, and that does great.
dude, I
Um,
surfed that exact board. I've surfed it across the world, like literal
oh
from
yeah.
like reef break to beach break. I've surfed. I
Oh, that's
have the
epic.
five. It's a five. I think that's the 5.8 model or the 5.9,
Yeah,
but it's
five
like
eight. It's the five
29
eight.
liter. Yeah, dude, I've surfed that from like I've gotten barreled on reef break on that
Oh,
board to
sick.
like casual. It's a really good all rounder. So that's my 20. Like I always have a
Right.
20 in my quiver. That's it. Um, I
That's
like my
awesome.
20s to be around the 29 liter mark. As short boards,
Mm-hmm.
I usually surf around 27 to 28 liters. The volume calculators. So I'm going to go at this two tangential ways. First, I need to preface this. I'm not super board savvy. I just happen to work
Okay.
alongside people that are like shapers and really board
Right.
savvy. And like, I can talk boards, but I'm not one of these people that's like, oh, mine's a 5/16 versus my 7/16 was two. I'm not that nuanced.
Right.
Um, I think we've gotten into a realm of board design at the moment where most people go too short way too fast. What we often see on our surf coaching trips is we got guys showing up with like 5.9s or 5.10s, these super high performance boards, and they just wiggle them all over the place. Or what they
Mm-hmm.
need is like a 6.2, a 6.3, or a 6.4 performance board. So remember the performance boards that pros were on in like the early 2000s? Be like a 6.4,
Right.
a
Right. The
6.5.
long
So
ones.
longer, dude. Take people's short boards, draw them out. You don't need to jack up the leaderage. And I'm not saying this is for you in particular, but what we see that works for people so often is we put them on a longer board, keep the volume
Mm-hmm.
kind of around what they were surfing, and that length makes everything easier for them. Everything. Easier
Okay.
entry. It's a longer board, so they have to learn how to like draw out a rail line and actually put it on rail. They can't just wiggle it all over the place like it's some silly little like
Mm,
smooth star, like
gotcha. Right.
so I think there's that going on. So then secondarily, volume. Let's say your volume's at like your calculators are saying 25 or 26 liters.
Mm-hmm.
If we took you to Indonesia and put you on perfect surf and you could read waves well, you would want something probably in that volume calculator in the 25
Oh,
or
interesting.
26 liter mark, depending what you were wanting to do with your surfing.
Right.
So people often can't read waves well. They're like, oh, I'm getting more
Mm-hmm.
volume. I can't catch waves. You're not catching waves because you don't actually try to like read and position waves. So they just
Yeah.
keep jacking up their volume.
Right.
And so then those volume calculators, I think, come into play when it's really good quality surf,
Okay.
because you can get away with less volume because the wave's offering you all the power and all the speed. And if you have too much volume, it's going to keep pushing you out ahead of the wave. Whereas if you have
Right.
lesser volume, you can interact right and directly with that kind of wave energy. So like
Gotcha.
usually people doing a volume calculator could easily, like their home breaks, add on a liter or two to what that volume
Mm-hmm.
calculator is saying. But then if you're surfing good quality surf, you can read waves well, which means you can position yourself for the easiest or
Mm-hmm.
most efficient takeoff. You can start dropping that literage. Does that make sense?
Right. That totally makes sense. 100%. I don't think I've ever been into like, I mean, I've surfed in Hawaii and in Cabo. Those were some of the
Yeah,
nicest waves that and cleanest waves that I've surfed. Like Honolulu Bay, epic, just epic. Favorite wave
amazing.
so far of all time. Um, and Ho'okipa on Maui as well is super fun. And those are probably like the cleanest waves, and you're not weighed down by a wetsuit either. So I could totally see how you need that uh, reduction in volume, a for speed control on like more critical waves, right? That's kind of what you were talking about, the volume of getting ahead of the wave. Um, I haven't been in too many of those positions. I've surfed mainly California beach breaks,
Yeah.
where the waves aren't so perfect, but that totally makes sense.
When I
Yeah, in
was
terms of volume.
like with some of my when I was still living in Australia, I was surfing mostly beach break and
Hmm.
good beach break when it's on. And so heaps of
Right.
paddling, man. I'd
Right.
happily on
Exactly.
bigger days surf something that was 30, 31 liters,
Right.
or and just stretched out a bit. Like my normal shortboard's a 5'10", 27.5 or 28 liter. But if I'm surfing like big paddling beach break, put me on like a 6'2" and give me 30 liters. I'll be stoked. It'll save my low back.
Right.
And it's there's a time and a place, right? And people, I think, are just often too frequently defaulting to way more volume just to make up for
Mm,
like bad positioning, bad reading, and really poor fitness. And the volume
right.
can be super helpful, super, super helpful. Um, so like in that realm, like when we're looking for people on surf trips and somebody's like, oh, I'm surfing like a 40-liter surfboard. I'm like,
Right.
okay, maybe not. Like do you have video footage? Can I see you surfing this 40-liter
Right.
board?
Right.
Um,
Right.
and some people can shred. Some people can fully shred on like a 40-liter board. So it's just time and
Right.
place.
Gotcha. Yeah, my next board, I grew up learning this, or I didn't grow up. I actually started surfing in my 20s. I also like messed around with skateboarding a bunch in my teens. But my home break is Ocean Beach in San Francisco, and one of
Yeah,
my goals is to get out there on a big day and just charge and
dude,
send it.
100%, man. Like we have quite a few. We've got two guys coming on our March trip that are both Ocean Beach surfers, and like I
Yeah.
see videos. I've never surfed it personally, but I see videos of it, man. I'd have a big ass surfboard.
Oh yeah. 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 It's
you
the
know?
current there is no joke. All right, well, I got just a few more questions we can wrap up soon. So on your website, on like the about me section, you have your goal listed there. So I'm going to read it out. So it says, my primary goal is to help surfers, athletes, and humans improve their potential with movement, exercise, nutrition, and the foundations of athleticism. Has
Yeah.
that goal or kind of purpose, if you will, has it changed? Has it stayed the same? Do you have a different purpose that you're kind of aiming for?
No, that's still pretty succinct, man. It
Yeah.
you and I come in the realm, we're in the health realm, right? We understand how relevant and important it is to have a body that can basically do what we're physically inclined to do. And
Right.
I think too many people in the modern Western world neglect the astounding and amazing good fortune you have or don't have to have a body that can function or not function. And
Right.
especially like I'm always it's one of these quotes I have on like Instagram far too frequently. I'm like, it's your, or something along the lines of like, your body is the vehicle through with which you surf, right? Like, yeah,
Right.
boards are important, but like, if your body can't move, you're not surfing. And so for most of us, surfing is really relevant to who we are and our interaction with life. And that completely relies upon your body's ability to move functionally well. And
Right.
so, it's how do you move? How do you eat? Like, what is the underlying fundamental status of your health? And is that supporting your ability? Like, if surfing's important to you, these other things, health, wellness, ultimately are relevant.
Right.
And so I think it's just trying to,
Totally.
help people reconnect with that and help give people tools that can help them do that and ultimately just have a body that is capable of doing whatever it is they want it to do.
Right. Sweet. Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that. So what are the like next moves for you? You have the app, you guys have the website and the trips. Any big future plans that you're thinking about?
Man, you're asking me like the existential
This is the
midlife
good stuff.
crisis questions, dude. This is like literally what gives me panic attacks the last couple months. So,
Appropriately on your after your
yeah,
40th birthday.
dude, like seriously, like these are the questions I've been pondering a lot.
Right.
Because you may or may not come to find in your career path, we are ultimately slaves to our hourly rate, unless
Right.
you own a
Exactly.
clinic, and you're a clinic director. And so on my precipice of 40 and cresting that hill, it's financial aspects are relevant because 50 is
Hmm.
not that far off and 60,
Right.
like these, whereas 20s and 30s, like I'm used to being broke. I'll live in Indonesia, like whatever, like, and then we're at the point now where we've got this business, we've done some incredible things with it. What are we going to do now that takes it to a place that one, I personally am okay with? Like, I'm not trying to get on TikTok. I'm not trying to
Right.
play this like stupid social media game. Like, what can I do that I am internally happy and professionally satisfied with that can still
Hmm.
support aspects of the business, like
Right.
you look at so much algorithm based social media content nowadays. I'm not the person that's going to make that shit. And I'm just like
Sure.
aware. And so if the business requires that from me, that's a disconnect. Like, where else can we steer this business and do with it things that are potentially financially long term goal oriented and also personally and professionally? So
Gotcha.
I personally, I still really want to work in high level facilities again. Um,
Hmm.
because I've done so much travel the last couple of years, that's made that difficult. I want to be in a really rich environment with other brilliant people and a collective facility where there's physios, there's chiros, there's strength coaches. Like,
Right.
that type of work environment to me is really professionally amazing and supportive. Um,
Right.
we'll we'll keep running surf coaching camps because personally they're amazing.
Right.
And
They
so,
seem
for
like it.
example, they're amazing, man. And like, we've been really fortunate that like all of our trips generally have 60 to 70% return guests.
Mm-hmm.
So like it's gotten to the point where like we often don't even have spaces for new people to join because all previous guests get first dibs at future trips. And so
Gotcha.
like we're
Cool.
obviously doing something right, you know, and then it's like, is there is there something there for us to do with the business? But then do we need to bring on other coaches and people are okay working with other coaches and not necessarily me or Twiggy or one of the other coaches? Um, and then ultimately, like I think professionally, I really need to start a podcast. And I've meant to for
Okay.
about the last year and a half. For about the last
Right.
year and a half. And like we even had everything in place. We had a marketing team that was going to push it. And like I just personally haven't had the time computer
Right.
wise to do it. But you know,
Sure.
like I've been fortunate that I'm not too far via connections from a lot of cool people in the surf world.
Right.
And so I think,
Right.
you know, we could get some cool conversations. And I also think that there's a huge subset of surfers, myself included, that are really detached and uninterested in professional surfing. Now, I don't mean that I don't watch the
Right.
CT. Like I will watch CT and pro level surfing, but like that's not
Mm-hmm.
my world. That's no part of my world. Like
Right.
it there's so many other conversations that could be had around surfing that aren't the pro media driven
Totally.
marketing behemoths, you know? And
Right.
I think there's a lot of people that would be really interested in that. And you know, I want to learn from people. So just personally, like I want to talk with brilliant people. So the
100%.
podcast, I'm putting it
That
out here, man. Like I just need to tell people I need to do a podcast. It needs to happen.
well, that's why I had you on the show. I'm stoked that you came and joined me. I super appreciate having this convo with you. Yeah, it's been super fun. And before I kind of ask you my last question, I just wanted to give you a moment of gratitude, just acknowledge you for dedicating kind of like your life and career to educating people about injury prevention and optimizing and maximizing their surf potential. You've helped like thousands of people at this point increase their health and well-being, and you've inspired me to follow a similar path when there's like very few people in the industry doing what you were doing. So super appreciative of you for that.
That's amazing,
And
man. That's
my
truly
final,
amazing. Thank you. Thank you very much. Like I
yeah, of,
sincerely appreciate it.
of course. And my last question would be to describe your perfect surf day.
Oh, dude. I mean, it kind of just happened on this last trip, man. We had the only thing that would have made this more perfect if it was a right-hander, but like on this last trip, it literally was a perfect surf day. It was two, where macaronis was perfect 4 to 6 foot all day
Yeah.
long, literally
Hmm.
all day, to the point where like I'm surfing and I'm coming in and chugging Coca-Cola so I can go back out.
That's amazing.
And
That's epic.
so it's it's a weird like drugged out bliss, really,
Right.
that it's so amazing and so perfect and you're so physically drained and it's so fun. That's kind of the perfect surf day. And the only thing that would have made it better was if it was a right-hander. So, I mean, that day was I get up. I don't like waking up early, to be honest, man. So like
No?
get
As a
up,
fitness
casual. No,
professional?
I don't. No, I loathe it. I had a guy recently ask if I'd start training him online 5:30 a.m. I was like, no, no way,
Hmm.
dude. Absolutely not.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
so you know, perfect surf day, man. Get up, have some fruit, a nice casual coffee, stretch out, chill for a bit, then start getting like mentally amped and then literally try and surf all day long. And if it's a perfect wave scenario, it'd be like a 5 to 6 foot perfect right hander that has like a
Yeah.
barrel section and then a section for like just some like big walled out turns.
Right.
And trying to do that all day with some intermittent, like amazing food in between. And I
Right.
mean, that's ultimately like what we try to do on the surf trips, you know? So
Right.
it's pretty good,
I
man.
gotta
It's
I gotta hop
pretty
in. I
amazing.
gotta hop in on those one day soon.
Dude,
Once they start
it's
paying off my
incredible.
debt a little bit, my that student debt's gonna be real.
The real deal, man.
Um,
It's the real deal, isn't it?
but yeah, but that sounds epic, man. Thank you so much for again sharing. I'm gonna stop the recording.